बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। मेरा नाम है आसिम मुख्तार। आप देख रहे हैं वॉइस ऑफ पांस की एक नई एपिसोड। आज 15 सितंबर है और लाइव आने का मकसद ये है कि आपके साथ गपशप लगाई जाए। और हमारे आज के गेस्ट जो हैं प्रियंका राधाकृष्णन हैं, मिनिस्टर फॉर एथनिक कम्युनिटीज़, यूथ, डाइवर्सिटी। तो जो लोग हमें देख रहे हैं काइंडली देख के बताइएगा कि मेरी आवाज़ और तस्वीर आप तक पहुंच रही है। मीनवाइल मैं भी कंफर्म करता हूं फेसबुक के राय जाकर कि हमारी आवाज़ और तस्वीर जो है वो लोगों तक आ रही है। जी बिल्कुल, कुछ लोगों ने हमें देखना शुरू कर दिया। अगर कुछ कमेंट करके बता दें कि मेरी आवाज़ और तस्वीर आप तक बिल्कुल ठीक तक आ रही है तो मुझे आसानी हो जाएगी, ताकि फिर मैं अपने जो मेरी आज को होस्ट हैं उनको इनवाइट करूं और फिर आज आपके साथ गपशप रहेगी। पहले कुछ 8 से 10 मिनट आपके साथ बात चलेगी। थैंक यू वेरी मच जिमी आरिफ कि आपने कंफर्म किया। इमरान भाई बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया। और इंशाल्लाह आपके साथ आज हमारा साथ रहेगा 9 बजे तक। और हमारी आज की जो होस्ट हैं, मेरी जो को होस्ट हैं, मैं उनको इनवाइट करता हूँ। स्क्रीन के ऊपर आयशा कोसर हैं। अस्सलाम वालेकुम आयशा, कैसी हैं आप? खैरियत से हैं?
वालेकुम अस्सलाम, ठीक ठाक। और अस्सलाम वालेकुम टू आवर कम्युनिटी मेंबर्स। उम्मीद करती हूँ कि आप सब खैरियत से होंगे और ऑकलैंड में जो है वो अपना लॉकडाउन एंजॉय कर रहे होंगे और दुआ कर रहे होंगे कि जल्दी खत्म हो जाए। और जो ऑकलैंड से बाहर है वो आई होप कि अपना फ्रीडम जो है वो एंजॉय कर रहे होंगे। या
बिल्कुल ऐसा ही है। ऐसा लगता है जैसे हम दो डिफरेंट मुल्कों के दरमियान में रह रहे हैं। मुझे कभी कभी साउथ अफ्रीका में एक छोटा सा मुल्क है, मेरा ख्याल है नाम है उसका बोटस्वाना, वो विद इन द बाउंड्रीज ऑफ साउथ अफ्रीका है। तो मुझे लगता है कि जैसे ये ऑकलैंड एक अलहदा मुल्क बन गया है विद इन न्यूजीलैंड, तो इसका नाम तमाकी मकोड़ो रख देना चाहिए। और इसका वीजा वगैरह लेकर अगर हम हैमिल्टन जाएं और हैमिल्टन वाले वीजा लेकर यहाँ पर आए तो मजा
हाँ।
आएगा।
हम्म।
और ये बताइएगा कि आपका लॉकडाउन कैसा चल रहा है? क्या एक्टिविटीज हैं आपकी?
लॉकडाउन जो है वो वैसे ही बस ऑनलाइन स्कूल चलता है सुबह। उसके बाद हमारी उर्दू की क्लास होती है जिसमें छोटे छोटे बच्चे आते हैं, वो उर्दू सीखते हैं और हमें जो है वो काफी खुशी होती है कि हमारी जो आपको पता है एक जिंदा कौम की पहचान जो है उसकी जुबान से होती है। तो हम पूरी कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि अपनी सारी रवायात अपनी जुबान के थ्रू जो है वो हम अपने अगली नस्ल में डालें। तो
बेशक।
वो हो रहा होता है। उसके बाद जो है वो नॉर्मल रूटीन जो होती है किचन और हाउस होल्ड चोर्स जो होते हैं हमारे वो चल रहा
बिल्कुल
होता
सही
है।
है। बिल्कुल
हाँ
सही
जी।
होगा। अच्छा, मैंने वो जो कंट्री विद इन द कंट्री है साउथ अफ्रीका के अंदर, एक छोटी सी कंट्री है, उसका नाम है लिसोथो, नॉट बोट्सवाना। बोट्सवाना तो से ऊपर है। लिसोथो एक कंट्री है जो कि साउथ अफ्रीका के अंदर है। और उसका अपना एक अलहदा से, इसी तरह इटली के अंदर वेटिकन सिटी जो है वो एक अलहदा से, रोम जो है वो एक अलहदा से मुल्क है। तो को ये जो ऑकलैंड है ये भी एक अलहदा से मुल्क बन चुका हुआ है, जो कि चारों तरफ से बंद है और ना
हाँ
यहाँ
जी।
से हम बाहर जा सकते हैं ना आ सकते हैं। अच्छा, आपने देखा जो अभी एक कपल निकल कर गया, पहले हैमिल्टन
हाँ
गया और हैमिल्टन से फ्लाई करके वानाका चला गया। तो
हाँ जी।
और वो उनके जो हस्बैंड थे, उनके पेरेंट्स, उनके जो मदर हैं वो जज हैं, आपको पता है। तो
हाँ
उन्होंने बड़ा
जी।
मजे का
और
बयान दिया ना कि मैं इनके साथ किसी किस्म के नहीं खड़ी होती और मुझे बड़ा दुख है कि ये इन लोगों ने ये हरकत की है।
हाँ जी, ऐसा ही है। ऐसा करना नहीं चाहिए था मगर हो जाती है गलती क्या कह
वेरी
सकता है बंदा।
हाँ, बिल्कुल ऐसा ही। और अगर खुदा ना खास्ता ये गलती हम आपसे हो जाती तो फिर क्या होता?
आ, पता नहीं
इमरान
पता
मजीद
नहीं
देख रहे हैं। इमरान इमरान भाई, अगर आप हमसे या अताउल हसनैन, अगर हमसे ऐसी गलती हो जाती जो अभी गोरों ने की है, ऑकलैंड से निकले अपना एसेंशियल वर्कर के जो अभी लेटर था वो दिखाकर और फिर वहां से वनाका चले गए, तो अगर यही गलती किसी पाकिस्तानी माइग्रेंट से हो जाती या किसी और माइग्रेंट से हो जाती तो क्या दे सुनने को मिलता? लोग अभी मेरा ख्याल है कमेंट कर रहे हैं।
हाँ
अच्छा,
जी। काफी
ये
जो है
बताइए।
वो। हम्म।
बिल्कुल ऐसे ही हमारे आज की जो मेहमान हैं उनके बारे में थोड़ा सा बताइएगा। नाइला असलम कह रही पाकिस्तानी क्या कहकर मार देते।
हाँ जी ऐसा ही होता। जी, जो हमारी अगली गेस्ट हैं वो है जी प्रियंका राधाकृष्णन, जो कि है हमारी पहली इंडियन ओरिजिन की एमपी न्यूजीलैंड पार्लियामेंट में। और मैं काफी एक्साइटेड हूँ उनको लेके, क्योंकि वो अगर हम देखा जाए तो वो हमें ही रिप्रेजेंट कर रही होती, क्योंकि हम भी एक डिफरेंट कम्युनिटी को बिलोंग करते हैं और डेफिनेटली वो एक रोल मॉडल है हमारे लिए कि हम उनको फॉलो करें।
हुँ,
तो इस वक़्त काफ़ी ज़्यादा जो है उनके पास लुक आफ्टर कर रही हैं वो डिफरेंट चीज़ों को, जिनमें से है मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ कम्युनिटी एंड वॉलंटरी सेक्टर, जो कि अगेन जिसको पैन्स उसके अंदर ही आती है, क्योंकि सारा वो वॉलंटरी सेक्टर है। मिनिस्टर ऑफ फॉर डाइवर्सिटी, इंक्लूजन एंड एथनिक कम्युनिटीज़ हैं, मिनिस्टर फॉर यूथ हैं, एंड शी इज़ ऑल्सो द एसोसिएट मिनिस्टर फॉर सोशल डेवलपमेंट एंड एम्प्लॉयमेंट। तो इससे रिलेटेड अगर हमारी कम्युनिटी के पास कोई भी क्वेश्चंस है तो वो प्लीज इधर हमें कमेंट में लिखें, और हम पूरी कोशिश करेंगे कि उन तक आपके ये सवालात जो है वो पहुंचाएं और हम उनसे वो जवाब जो है वो लें।
बिल्कुल ठीक है।
हाँ जी।
अब आगे बढ़ते हैं। पहले तो मैं नायला जी का शुक्रिया अदा करूँगा, उन्होंने रिप्लाई किया कि पाकिस्तानी कह कहकर मार देते, या ये भी कहते सेंड देम बैक वेयर दे कम फ्रॉम। तो ये भी एक बड़ा सुनने को मिलता है माइग्रेंट्स को कि जहाँ से आए उधर वापस भेज दें। अच्छा, बातें तो हमारी चलती रहेंगी। थोड़ा-सा उर्दू स्कूल के हवाले से हमें बताइएगा कि उसमें इस वक़्त आप कौन से लेवल तक पहुँच गई हैं? मैं देख रहा हूँ छोटे-छोटे बच्चे अपनी नानी-दादी को खत लिख कर भेज रहे हैं।
हाँ,
बड़ा मज़ा
हाँ
आता है
जी।
पढ़ के देखने का, और वो बिल्कुल अभी 3, 4, 5 साल के बच्चे हैं, एंड दे हैव स्टार्टेड राइटिंग एट लीस्ट। तो थोड़ा-सा उसके बारे में हमारी जो कम्युनिटी इस वक़्त देख रही है, उनको थोड़ा-सा अपने उर्दू स्कूल के ऊपर अपडेट दीजिएगा।
हाँ जी। तो हमने जो है वो लॉकडाउन का फ़ायदा उठाते हुए उर्दू स्कूल जो है वो स्टार्ट किया विद द डायरेक्शन एंड लीडरशिप ऑफ नवीद भाई, और उसके साथ जो थी सानिया अशरफ भाभी जो है वो हमारे साथ मिली, और उन्होंने इसका जो है वो स्टार्ट किया। और उर्दू स्कूल में इस वक़्त हमारे पास अप्रॉक्सिमेटली 150 बच्चे जो हैं वो हैं, और जिसमें हम रीडिंग भी सिखा रहे हैं उन फीमेल्स को जो कि कन्वर्टेड हैं या जिनकी शादियां जो है वो पाकिस्तानी से हुई हैं और वो अच्छा कम्युनिकेट करना चाह रही है उर्दू में। और जो बच्चे हैं वो भी डिफरेंट कैटेगरीज के हैं। हमारे पास 5 साल से लेके 12, 13, 16, 17 साल उम्र तक के बच्चे हैं। अ, इधर मैं एक कमेंट करना चाहूंगी कि ज्यादातर बच्चे जो हैं वो उन्होंने कुरान पढ़ा हुआ है, तो उनको वर्ड्स की जो है वो समझ है, जो बेसिक हमारे हरूफ हैं।
हुँ,
लेकिन हमने अपना स्टार्ट किया बेसिक उर्दू, उनको हरूफ सिखाए, उसके बाद इनको 2 हरूफ मिलाना, 3 हरूफ मिलाना, 4 हरूफ मिला के अल्फाज बनाना, और आहिस्ता आहिस्ता जुमले बनाना, मुज़क्कर मुअन्नस और अल्फाज मुतज़ाद, ये सारी हमने चीजें बेसिक जो उर्दू की जो चीजें होती हैं वो सिखाई। और अब और हर वीकेंड, उनका वीकेंड होता है फ्राइडे,
बिल्कुल सही हो गया।
फ्राइडे को उनको छुट्टी होती है, और हर वीकेंड उनको एक होमवर्क दिया जाता है कि या वो लेटर लिखें या पाकिस्तान के बारे में कुछ लिखें, और इस वीकेंड भी उनको एक होमवर्क मिलेगा जो कि अभी हम डिसाइड कर रहे हैं कि क्या मिले, बट एज अ होल इट इज गोइंग वेरी गुड।
हुँ,
और इसको हमने पता है हमारा हमारा जो फोकस था वो स्टार्ट करना तो था ही, लेकिन उसके साथ साथ इसको सस्टेन करना, इसको मेंटेन करना फॉर द लॉन्गर पीरियड भी था। तो उसके लिए हमने अपना जो सारा मटेरियल है वो हमने किया शिफ्ट गूगल क्लासरूम के ऊपर, जिसमें हमने काफी सारे बच्चों को तकरीबन ऐड किया, ताकि वो
हुँ,
टाइम टू टाइम जो है वो उधर जाएं, अपने रिसोर्सेज को देखें और उधर से रिवाइज करें। और जो आगे आने वाले बच्चे हैं उनके लिए भी सारा जो सेटअप है वो रेडी हो, या आगे आने वाले जो टीचर्स भी हैं जो आगे पढ़ाएं उनके लिए भी एक गाइडलाइन जो है वो मौजूद हो। तो अ बिग क्रेडिट गोज टू पैंस कि उन्होंने ये इनिशिएट किया। जैसे मैंने आपको कहा कि ज़ुबान सीखना बहुत ज़रूरी है, तो डेफिनिटली पैंस हैज़ प्लेड इट्स पार्ट, और बाकी जो है पेरेंट्स का भी शुक्रिया कि वो इतना टाइम देते हैं और बच्चों को
बेशक, बेशक। मैं
सिखाते
मैं चाहूँगा जो कम्युनिटी में लोग देख रहे हैं, तो वो भी थोड़ा-सा इसके अंदर अपना कमेंट सेक्शन में अपनी राय का इज़हार करें कि क्यों ज़रूरी समझा जाता है कि ज़ुबान को सीखा जाए, बोलना, लिखना और पढ़ना। तो इसमें ज़रा ज़रूर हमें कमेंट करिएगा। जैसे आयशा ने बताया कि इम्पोर्टेंट है कल्चर की अवेयरनेस के हवाले से, उसके अलावा भी जो जो हमारी मट्टी की खुशबू है, वो हमारी ज़ुबान में से आती है। तो थोड़ा-थोड़ा बताते जाइएगा, तो मैं उसको ऐड करता जाऊँगा अपने साथ। अच्छा, मुझे बड़ी खुशी होती है अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह, विदिन 3 टू 4 वीक्स, इवन 4 वीक्स भी नहीं शायद हुए, 3 वीक्स में बच्चों ने लिखना शुरू कर दिया है। पहले तो बात ये होती है कि आपको सिर्फ लफ्ज़ों की समझ आ जाना है कि अलिफ क्या है, कैसे लिखते हैं, बे कैसे लिखते हैं, ते कैसे लिखते हैं, और फिर उसके बाद उसको अलिफ और बे को इकट्ठा किया, अब बे और ते को इकट्ठा किया, बुत या बत बन गया, और इस तरह बे अलिफ बा बा बाद बनाया। ये बड़ी छोटी-छोटी चीज़ें। लेकिन जब आप ये लिखना शुरू कर दें, मेरी प्यारी नानी जान मैं
हाँ
आपको
जी।
बहुत याद करती हूँ, या मेरी प्यारी दादी जान आप मेरे पास आ जाएँ, तो बड़ा बड़ा ही खुशी होती है कि इतने छोटे-छोटे बच्चे माशाल्लाह अब पूरे-पूरे जुमले बनाना शुरू हो गए हैं। तो इसका मतलब ये है कि हमारी कम्युनिटी में माशाल्लाह एक तो चाहत भी है उर्दू सीखने की, उनके पेरेंट्स भी काम कर रहे हैं, और अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह आप लोगों की भी जो एफर्ट है वो एकदम से उसका रिज़ल्ट नज़र आना शुरू हो गया। तो आपको भी खुशी होती है देख कर के ये बच्चे इतना ज़बरदस्त काम कर रहे हैं?
हाँ जी, मुझे तो बहुत खुशी होती है क्योंकि हमारी क्लास का आगाज़ जो होता है वो कुरान की तिलावत से होता है, ठीक है? हम वो रखते हैं। उसके बाद जो है हम उनको डेली जो है वो नज़्में और कहानियाँ जो हैं वो भी देते हैं कि उसको देखें और उसमें से वर्ड्स जो हैं वो चूज़ करें और उसके मतलब बताएँ। और फिर जो नज़्म होती है वो हम अगले दिन उनसे सुनते हैं और वो इतनी प्यारी नज़्म सुनाते हैं, आप सोच नहीं अपने इंग्लिश एक्सेंट में उर्दू बोलते हैं। बहुत क्यूट लगते हैं और बहुत ही ज़्यादा खुशी होती है। मैंने पहले भी कहा था कि मेरा मोस्ट प्रोडक्टिव जो है ना 1 आवर वो ये होता है कि मैं जब इनको उर्दू सिखाती हूँ या उनसे जब बातें करती हूँ उर्दू में, तो वो काफ़ी अच्छा लग रहा होता है और
बहुत
बहुत खुशी की बात है।
बिल्कुल ठीक हो गया। 2 क्वेश्चन क्विकली। एक ये कि लॉकडाउन खत्म हो गया, तो फिर तो ऑब्वियसली बच्चे स्कूल जाना शुरू कर देंगे। तो उसके वक़्त में जो इस वक़्त तकरीबन 150 से 200 बच्चा आपके पास पढ़ रहा है और मुख्तलिफ क्लासेस में पढ़ रहा है और मुख्तलिफ लेवल्स के ऊपर पढ़ रहा है, तो उस वक़्त फिर आप क्या करेंगी? और दूसरा जो क्वेश्चन है मेरा वो ये है कि अगर कोई और वॉलंटियर करना चाहे, आगे चलकर कोई माशाल्लाह हमारे बहुत सारे ऐसे लोग हैं जो उर्दू को बहुत अच्छा लिखना पढ़ना जानते हैं और वो अगर आपके साथ आकर अपना वॉलंटियर करना चाहें तो उनको क्या आप लोग वेलकम कहेंगे?
अच्छा, पहली सवाल का जवाब ये है कि ये बड़ी क्लियरली कम्युनिकेट कर दिया गया था कि जैसे ही लॉकडाउन फिनिश होगा, क्लासेस जो हैं वो शिफ्ट हो जाएँगी सैटरडे, संडे। तो सैटरडे संडे को उनकी क्लासेस होंगी। अभी भी हमने ऑकलैंड वालों की एक क्लास जो है वो सैटरडे को फिनिश करके हमने कैचअप क्लास रखी है आउट ऑफ ऑकलैंड जो बच्चे थे हमारे पास वो 6 से 7 बच्चे हैं तो उनके लिए हम सैटरडे और संडे को उनकी क्लासेस हो रही है तो आई होप जब लॉकडाउन एंड होगा तो हम 2 दिन इसको कंटिन्यू रखेंगे पर वीक
हुँ,
उसके
हुँ,
बाद जो आपका सवाल है कि वॉलंटियर डेफिनेटली वी विल वेलकम वॉलंटियर और हमें चाहिए भी होंगे डेफिनेटली क्योंकि जितने आपके पास क्रिएटिव माइंड्स होते हैं उतनी ही प्रोडक्टिविटी और क्रिएटिविटी जो है वो सामने आ रही होती है तो डेफिनेटली वी विल वेलकम देम अभी भी सिर्फ सानिया भाभी थी और मैंने वॉलंटियर किया क्योंकि उनको नहीं इतने बच्चे आ गए थे माशाल्लाह
हुँ, हुँ।
और जब भी हमें आगे भी ज़रूरत होगी तो हम कम्युनिटी में जाएँगे, उनसे पूछेंगे और डेफिनिटली वी विल वेलकम देम। हाँ जी।
बहुत खूब, बहुत खूब। तो इसका मतलब है कि उर्दू क्लासेस अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह इसका एक तो प्रोडक्टिव हैं, रिज़ल्ट्स आ रहे हैं, लोग बच्चे काम भी कर रहे हैं। तो इंशाल्लाह वो उस पे बातचीत चलती रहेगी। मुझे लगता है कि हमारी जो आज की गेस्ट हैं वो जॉइन कर चुकी हुई हैं। तो आयशा मैं आपसे कहूँगा कि आप उनको उनका इंट्रोडक्शन कराइए हमारे लोगों के साथ और फिर मैं उनको स्क्रीन के ऊपर लेकर आता हूँ।
सही जी, थैंक यू। तो जी, today with us we have got an amazing leader and MP of Labour Party who is the first minister in New Zealand of Indian origin. So it is my immense pleasure to have on board Honorable Priyanka Radhakrishnan. So please welcome her on the platform of Voice of PANZ. So, telling a little bit more about Priyanka Radhakrishnan is currently Minister for the Community and Voluntary Sector, Minister for Diversity, Inclusion, and Ethnic Communities, Minister for Youth, and Associate Minister for Social Development and Employment. So, welcome and thank you for taking time out for us.
वेलकम
How are
प्रियंका।
you?
Kia ora, assalamu alaikum. Can I just check that you can hear me all right?
Yes, we
Yeah.
can. We
Oh,
can.
good. Thank you for having me on your show. How are you both?
We're
Good.
doing good. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you. It's
thank you
been
very
an
much for
interesting 5 weeks.
Yeah, thank you very
Yeah.
much for accepting our invitation. And luckily, we're having you third time on this show. Thank you very much again.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure.
Yeah, I'll ask my co-host Aisha to start with the questions.
Yeah, so yes, Priyanka, the first question, which is that you are definitely a true inspiration for many of the ethnic communities over here, and for the women especially. So I would just like to know that what was your inspiration to reach here where you are today?
What was my inspiration? I mean, I guess a few. Firstly, I think I'd probably have to credit my parents because they taught us at a young age to question the status quo and to read, things like the news and the current affairs, and we'd have conversations at home around those things. So it made me aware of what was happening around me. And then when I moved to New Zealand, of course, I worked largely with a refuge organization in the NGO sector. And so part of my role was providing that crisis support, but part of it was also lobbying governments for legislative and policy change based on the experiences of the women who came to the organization for support. So I guess part of me had worked for some years to try and bring about some change that would benefit people. And then eventually, to cut a long story short, when I was doing my master's, I happened to become quite friendly with a former senior cabinet minister who was doing a paper with me. And of course, the middle bit of this, I guess, is that I had joined the Labour Party 2 years after I moved to New Zealand, just because, you know, at that time, they were the only party that I had seen do something beneficial for migrant communities. And also my boss at the time was standing, so I got involved. And then I realized that the values of the party reflects my own. And so I stayed, never once thought of standing for Parliament, but I just wanted to help out behind the scenes, and I volunteered like many other people do. But then when I did my master's and I met someone who'd been in cabinet before, and he suggested that I had been knocking on the doors for change from the NGO sector for quite some years, and would I consider, you know, attempting to be at the table and being part of that change from inside Parliament, and that appealed to me, and I thought, well, yeah, I'll give that a go, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Great, thank you very much. And I must acknowledge the kind of work you're doing with the communities and extending your support, being a minister, and you're very achievable and very approachable. My next question is regarding the diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what does these words means to you? Why they are important in New Zealand society?
Yeah, I feel very strongly about them, and I think that'll come as no surprise. But we are an incredibly diverse country. You know, we have over 213 ethnicities represented across Aotearoa. We speak collectively over 170 languages. We belong to so many different faith communities, and I think that is such a strength for us as a nation, from so many different points of view. Firstly, that means, you know, from a foreign affairs and trade perspective, it means that we have connections to so many different parts of the world, and people here in New Zealand with an understanding of how those contexts work and how things work in those countries. And I think that's a huge advantage for us. But we also know that diversity means differences of perspectives, differences of experiences, diversity of thought and backgrounds. That brings a huge amount of strength to decision making. So I think that any level of decision making, we should have diversity represented there, because it strengthens that the decisions that are made at that level. Now, inclusion is what we need to ensure that the strengths of that diversity is maximized. And it means people feeling a sense of belonging. It means people, regardless of who they are or where they've come from, feeling safe, feeling valued, heard, and being able to contribute and participate in every level of, whether it's decision making or any level of society, really. So becoming an inclusive society doesn't just happen by accident. We need to take steps to become that society. And I feel, and I know that internationally, New Zealand is regarded as a country that has a high level of social cohesion or inclusion. But I feel there's more that we can do. And I think a lot of us who come from different ethnic communities or faith backgrounds will know that things aren't perfect. There are more steps that we can take to become inclusive, so that the diversity that already exists can thrive and be maximized. So that's why I feel really strongly that we need to take those steps. And I feel privileged to be in a position where I can contribute to some of that.
Brilliant.
Yeah, thank you, Priyanka. And I can second that, whatever you are saying, because I've seen that how there has been the changes in all the sectors. Like, I belong to education sector, and I've been seeing that how many professional developments we had to do for being culturally responsive and inclusion and all that, because the change is happening. So thank you for doing all those things. So my next question would be that, in your opinion, what is the most challenging aspect of working with diverse ethnic communities?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I've already touched on what the opportunities are with diversity. So with everything comes challenges as well, of course. And I think for us, the flip side of having 213 ethnicities represented means that there's a challenge to ensure that everything we do is done in a way that is relevant to those communities and accessible. So if you were to pick just COVID-19 and the pandemic as an example, there has been a huge amount of work underway to ensure that COVID messaging, for example, reaches our diverse communities. Now, with 213 or so, in many smaller communities, some larger communities, different barriers that exists even within the same community, the way that you need information to be tailored to young people from certain communities, ensuring that our older people or our senior citizens are able to access that information as well, is a challenge. So ensuring, language accessibility, but also the different social media platforms or the ways in which people connect. So if you are serious about inclusion and valuing diversity, then you will know that a one-size-fits-all approach will not work, that you've got to deliver things in different ways. Government services, for example, that is one of the priorities of the new Ministry for Ethnic Communities, is to ensure that government services and initiatives are developed in a way that is relevant to our diverse communities. And that poses, I'll be completely upfront about it. It poses a challenge. It's not easy to do, but we've got to keep persevering to ensure that we do that. So I think that itself is a challenge in addressing the different needs and aspirations of different communities, reaching them in the first place, and then ensuring participation or access to leadership. Have we just lost Asim, have we?
No, I'm back.
Sorry.
Has gone.
Sorry.
I got a bit worried there for a minute, but no, it's all good. So I think there are some challenges that comes with the diversity that we have, but equally the opportunities are significant.
Totally right with you here, and thank you very much for comprehensively answering this question. We all believe that the ethnic communities make a huge contribution to the New Zealand economy and obviously the social fabric. The question is that recent setup of the Ministry of Ethnic Communities, and you're heading the Ministry of Ethnic Communities now, and I've attended some of their meetings and expecting a lot of work from them. So in terms of when it comes to training the public sector, especially when your ministry will be working with the public sector staff, how can they better aware the requirement, the social and psychological needs of ethnic communities? How can you train the staff within your organization and other public organizations as well?
So within the ministry itself, a large percentage of people who work with the ministry are from the communities that the ministry serves. And I think that is important. So one of the things our government did in the last term was to significantly strengthen the resourcing of the then Office of Ethnic Communities. We pretty much doubled the staffing capacity of the office. And that was to ensure that as our communities have grown significantly in terms of population size, in terms of diversity and geographical spread as well, we need to ensure the ministry is able to reach out to them, engage with them, and find out what their needs and their aspirations are, and equally what's working well. So that's why we increased the resourcing to OEC, and that's why a large number of our staff are from ethnic communities themselves, speak a number of different languages, and belong to different faith communities also. The other thing that we did, and I'll touch upon that further down the track, but the other thing that we did in the last term was to increase the Ethnic Communities Development Fund. That was about 520,000 per year, a one-off application that went out to communities. We increased that eightfold to 4.2 million per year. And then we expanded the things that fund could support and made it a rolling fund, so people can apply any time of the year for specific projects rather than waiting for that one-time application. So that's one thing. The other thing is the main difference between, and I apologize if you can hear my dogs, but they're going a little bit insane at the moment. The other thing that is underway, of course, is ensuring that our public sector more broadly has the capacity to respond to the needs and the aspirations of our communities. And there are a few things happening there. the ministry is the government's chief advisor when it comes to ethnic communities and inclusion of ethnic communities in wider society. So the ministry will have a role to play in ensuring that we work with other government agencies to understand the diverse needs, and be able to respond to them. I'm already seeing that happening with Mervyn at the helm as the CE of the ministry. He has a seat at the top table with chief executives from other government agencies. And even in this last 5 weeks of the COVID lockdown, what we're gathering from different communities, he then passes through the other CEs to the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Social Development. So I talk to my ministerial colleagues, he speaks to his chief executive colleagues, and we feed through what we've heard through community engagement to effect change. So you'll see, for example, the guidelines that was put out through the Unite Against COVID website. We had some feedback, particularly from our Muslim communities, around funerals and what could happen with funerals at alert level 4. That was fed through to the all of government team, and we've seen some changes. So you'll see that the guidelines have been updated just this week to reflect the needs of our Muslim community as well. So I'm already seeing what I had hoped for with this ministry, which was, for a long time, we've had an entity, the office previously, that was reaching out and listening to our communities. We didn't have the mechanism to then use that to effect change that would benefit our communities. That's the piece of the puzzle that we now have with the transition from the office to the ministry. And I'm already seeing that happening, and there's a lot more to do as well. The third and the final bit of this puzzle of making our public sector more responsive to diverse ethnic communities is a piece of work that is led by the Public Sector Commission that oversees the whole of the public service. The Public Service Commission. It's a piece of work called Papapo Namu, and one part of that is to ensure diversity at various levels, including leadership levels in the public service, and to ensure that government agencies have what they need and are equipped to be able to respond to diversity. That's led by the PSC, the Public Service Commission.
Yeah, thank you, Priyanka, for raising the voice for the Muslims and making those changes. We really appreciate that. My next question would be around that Islam and Muslim thing, that after the recent terrorist attack, there is a growing Islamophobia, which may result in Muslim inclusiveness and integrations. So how your ministry will be ensuring that Muslims are provided with equal opportunities?
So one of the first things that we collectively did after the West Auckland terror attack, this was the Prime Minister, myself, and the ministry, including Mervyn himself. We reached out on that Friday evening to a number of leaders within the Muslim community and the Sri Lankan community, particularly, knowing that those are the two communities that would be the hardest hit by what had happened. And so we reached out as soon as we could to ensure that they were doing okay, and to check in with them to find out if they needed any further support from any of us, from the government more broadly. They were also looped in with the police and the ethnic liaison team from the police to make sure that from a safety or security point of view that they had what they needed as well. And that continues. I know that the ministry continues to reach out and make sure that people know that we're here so that we can provide the support that is needed. So that was in the immediate aftermath of what happened. Further down the track, of course, and also behind the scenes, the Ministry for Ethnic Communities is looped in with the police and other government agencies who have a responsibility in this particular attack to ensure that we provide the support there as well. So that's what happened immediately. Further down the track, there will be conversations. One of the things that I did was to check in with our Afghan communities as well, because I knew right from the start, as events unfolded in Afghanistan, that would impact the well-being of our Afghan communities here. I also knew that was then compounded by COVID-19 and the lockdown that we went into, and then again by the terror attack. And so we've been checking in with them as well. I've had some online sessions with particularly the youth and the women from Afghan communities. One of the first things the ministry did, I'd asked them to compile a list of support services that could also I guess could also be relevant to those from the Afghan community who spoke Farsi, Dari, or Pashto. We also translated that one-pager of support services in those languages, so it was accessible to all of them. We checked that 1737 had the translation support that they needed to be able to deal particularly with that community. And so there's some of those immediate things that we can do when something like this happens, and to check it and make sure that people know we're there to support. Then further down the track, as things come out around perhaps the broader needs of mental well-being support that is culturally appropriate, that has been raised with me as an issue time and again by a number of people from across ethnic communities. And so I've asked the ministry to do some work to look at what we might be able to do alongside perhaps the Ministry of Health to plug some of those gaps. One of the things that I'll say here for anyone who might be listening as well is that when our government made trades training free, we also expanded the definition of trade to include mental health support and youth workers. And so I will put this out there as an ask to anyone from our communities, from the Pakistani community, who may be interested in upskilling or qualifying as a support worker or a mental health support worker, to please do that, because that's also how we build the workforce that is culturally appropriate. It's a collective responsibility. So I'm going to put that out there, and if you could share that through your networks, I'd be most grateful as well, because it would help all of us. And then there'll be questions around, radicalization. What role does the ministry play in that? It'll be a broader piece of work rather than just something that the Ministry for Ethnic Communities leads, but there will be a part for us to play in all of those conversations further down the track as well. I also know that the ministry has been looped in with the Ministry of Education to ensure that in schools and so on, particularly schools that have Muslim children, are sensitive and are aware of how to deal in an aftermath of an attack like this in a way that's sensitive.
Yeah, thank you very much. Is there any plan that your ministry working closely with the police, especially aftermath of the New Zealand terrorist attack, when the kids start going to the school, there may be a bullying or there may be racial attacks on them, and especially the women which are wearing hijabs, and they are very terrified at the moment. And I've actually received a lot of calls from the women and they are actually thinking of letting go their hijab, which is obviously very difficult decision for us, and it's kind of bringing them a mental health issue with them. So is there any specific things which the ministry will be going directed towards the Muslim community, especially the youth and the women?
Yeah, look, mostly, the role of the ministry, of course, is to check in and hear from our communities, from our youth and our women. They've done that specifically. They've held Zoom huis now with youth. I understand that's turned into a regular catch-up that they have with officials from the ministry, and that's to capture what their anxieties, their concerns, and their issues are. The ministry then also works with other ministries like education, for example, and they do work with the police as well, to then try and translate some of those fears into solutions that can be implemented to address them. But equally, if you've mentioned that you've been contacted by a number of people, please feel free to pass that on as well, because that helps us look at what solutions we need to put in place, or to work with other ministries to put in place. So if there are specific things that you would like to see us do, please pass that on, and I'm quite happy to consider that.
Just a suggestion on that is there a way that we portray or highlight the values, the culture, the economic activities we bring with us, being a migrants and Muslims, and the efforts we make to make this society better? If we can do some kind of maybe a documentary, maybe a report, maybe something to highlight these efforts, so that the community, the other community, understand better that what we bring to this country.
Yes, of course, there's always a place to do that. I mean, one of the things that I would say is that I don't think any community needs to justify its existence or its contribution. So I don't feel that you should need to have to do that to make people more comfortable with the Muslim community. But if that's something that you feel there would be value in doing, you might also want to look at, for example, the Ethnic Communities Development Fund, because that fund that I mentioned that we've increased significantly is there to support community initiatives like this. So you will have undoubtedly people within the Muslim community who'd be able to tell that story the best. You will have people with the skills to be able to do that as well. So one of the ways in which we can support communities to lead their own solutions is to help by funding it. So do look into the CDF and look at perhaps whether that's something that you'd like to take the lead on with some support.
Thank you.
Yeah. So talking on the same, thank you very much for that. That was a really very good answer. So what is the Ministry of Ethnic Communities doing to strengthen support to the voluntary and community sector, especially when the focus is on the community lead initiatives?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll again point to the fund that I mentioned, because that is one of the main ways, and that has been increased significantly, 8-fold, to support communities with their initiatives. I mean, a lot of the focus of that fund is to help communities grow their skills, celebrate their culture, to participate in society. And now for the last, year and a half or so, there's been a focus on COVID. So supporting community-led initiatives to help their communities deal with the challenges of COVID. So that would be one of the main ways. The other way is to link in and connect community groups with other government agencies like the Ministry for Social Development, for example, or the Civil Defence and Emergency Management groups, local services that are providing services that perhaps are relevant to different ethnic communities, but sometimes there's a lack of awareness of what can be accessed. And so the ministry plays a role in connecting community groups from our communities, from ethnic communities, to those services that already exist as well.
Thank you very much. We do have some questions from the viewers as well, and I will bring that on the screen. Kaisar Rashid is asking, great work, PANZ, and a question here. How does the Office of Ethnic Communities bridge or offer services to ethnic entrepreneurs or the businesses?
Yeah, so just going to correct that. It is the Ministry for Ethnic Communities now. But in terms of connection to businesses, it depends on what sort of support is being asked for. So again, the responsibility for small businesses, for example, sits with the Minister for Small Business and MB more broadly. So connections are then made between the Ministry for Ethnic Communities and MB, depending on what the nature of support is that is being sought. But if there are specific services that ethnic businesses are asking for, again, please feel free to send that through to us as well.
Yeah. So, Kaisar, please. Yeah. Go ahead, sister.
Yes. So we have got another question on a very light note. It is from Amar Munir, and he's asking that, are you doing special preparations to watch India versus Pakistan cricket match during T20 cricket? World Cup 2020.
I do like cricket, I have to say. As a child, like many others, I've played a little bit of street cricket myself. I haven't made any special preparations, I have to say, to watch the match, but if I can, I'd be quite keen to tune in.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Amar, I have that answer your question, and thank you very much for putting up this question. The next question is, there is growing acceptance of a diverse workforce among organizations, and we are working with different organizations, and I feel that there is a lot of acceptance and people are seeing that diversity as an opportunity. However, when it comes to the management or leadership positions of the migrants or the ethnic communities are discriminated. You don't see many migrants sitting on the leadership or the management positions. How can we overcome that?
Yes, I completely agree with you. And I think that is, there's a massive opportunity for us there. So a few things. There is some work that is underway by the ministry because it is an area of focus for me and for the ministry as well. In fact, of the 4 priorities of the new ministry, looking at leadership positions and barriers to employment makes up one of those 4 priorities for the ministry. So one thing I'll say is that we do have a nominations database. The ministry is looking at what further work can be done to strengthen that database, but it does exist. So anyone who's interested in a board position, can I please put out another ask and ask people to send their details in and to register with the nominations database. So that's one. Secondly, there is work, quite a program of work that the Ministry of Ethnic Communities has undertaken with, for example, the Super Diversity Institute and Leadership New Zealand. And I know that conversations are underway with the Institute of Directors as well, to look at what we can collectively or collaboratively do to get people on public sector boards. You may be aware that this year was only the second time ever that government has collected data on the ethnicity of people on public sector boards and committees. These are boards that are appointed by ministers, largely. We last year was the first time that we had even looked at the ethnicity data or captured that data, done a stock take. This year was the second year. We've seen an increase of 1 percentage point. That is not good enough for me. We're trending in the, we're moving in the right direction. At least we haven't gone back. But we're something like 4% of public sector boards, and there's something like 500 boards, and only 4% are from, I see, guys, I suppose that's all good. I just wanted people to know that it's now a ministry because I'm so proud of them. But yeah, so the huge amount that we need to do. So we're looking for board-ready people who have any governance experience, plus expertise in various areas, right from health through to engineering, through to, there are various boards that are out there, and to put people on them. We're building or expanding the pool and looking at ensuring that we have a sustainable pipeline of people to put through to board appointments. So that's part of it. The other part that I mentioned earlier was the Papapo'anamu piece of work that the Public Service Commission is leading, and that is to ensure leadership in the public service. So not boards particularly, but looking at your different government agencies and injecting some cultural competence at various levels, including the top 3 tiers of management there. The final thing that I'll say, and this is not so much about leadership specifically or management, but the graduate program that the ministry established this year, we kicked that off or launched that in July, and we had the first intake. It was initially meant to be 15 places. We had about 400 people apply for those 15 positions in the public service. So what that graduate program does is to place skilled graduates from across ethnic communities into various government agencies, including the intelligence agencies. They will then be supported by the Ministry of Ethnic Communities. Both the managers of those graduates plus the graduates themselves have a wraparound program of support there. So it gets people in the door, largely at a policy level. And also it injects that broader cultural competence that the Royal Commission of Inquiry highlighted was crucial. So that is another way in which we are trying to ensure that the public sector gets the cultural competence that it needs and that people get the opportunities that they are looking for as well.
Yeah. Thank you very much. That was quite an answer in detail, and I'm sure that all the community members who are watching, who are eager to get into all these things, can just have a look at that. And it's very simple and easy. It's there's a page where you just have to go, and there are different boards, and you just have to click on one, and it will give you a form. So just go for that and utilize that opportunity. So thank you, Priyanka, for explaining us that. So moving on to the next question, which is related to that how many New Zealanders with different ethnicities are actually stranded overseas, and they are facing severe implications like losing their jobs back home. So what will be done about them?
Look, my understanding is that, over the last 18 months, there were, for example, a number of repatriation efforts that were made to bring New Zealanders back. So New Zealand citizens and permanent residents who were in those initial days of the border closure were eligible to come back to New Zealand, but were stranded because of the lack of flights. My understanding now is that largely flights have picked up, and that most who have wanted to return to New Zealand have done so, and that it's largely those who are on temporary visas who aren't eligible with the border closures to return who are stranded. So my understanding is not that that there's a large number of New Zealanders stranded offshore, but that would actually be a matter for MFAT, for the Ministry for Foreign Affairs and Trade, to deal with.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And I hope that the people who have got stranded must have come back by now. So the people who are
Yeah.
watching us, if they have any specific question to ask from Priyanka Radhakrishnan, you are more than welcome to put it in there. Naveed Hamid have asked a question. Do you think revised MIQ booking system will work better?
Yeah, well, I hope so. There is the system from memory is soon to be underway. I think it's next week from what I've seen, and also just bearing in mind that no government has had a playbook to deal with COVID over the last 18 months. So a number of things needed to be put in place immediately, or very quickly, for us to keep New Zealand as safe as we could. And consistently over the last 18 months, we've tried to improve various systems, including the MIQ system, so that it's fair, accessible, but also keeps us as safe as we possibly can here. So I guess we'll wait and see.
Next question is not in your official position, just a personal opinion. When do you think that we will be able to visit our home countries? Like, when will be the border open and the life is back to normal?
Yeah, I mean, you would have seen the Prime Minister's plan to reconnect New Zealand to the international community in a way that continues to keep us safe. The challenge has always been that for us, safety has always been paramount, which means that the borders has always been our first line of defense to COVID. And that's why we've been incredibly strict with the MIQ facility. People often think MIQ facility is just about the physical space. It's about the health workforce and the defense workforce that is based at those facilities as well. So we've had to maintain that. But I know that that's meant that a lot of us, myself included, I'm just going to say I'm in the same position, haven't been able to visit countries where we have close family members as well. And I know that it's incredibly difficult, but there is a plan for a phased opening. I think from memory, the PM said that we'll be looking at sometime next year. And that's why vaccination is incredibly important, because that is a huge part of the plan to reconnect us with the rest of the world as well. So my other plug for everyone who's watching, if you haven't booked your vaccine,
Yes.
if you haven't booked your vaccination, please do that. I had my first one yesterday, and it was incredibly simple to bring it forward, or just to go to one of the drive-through or walk-in vaccination centres, either at the airport, if you're down south in Auckland, or the West Auckland Trust's stadium accepts walk-ins as well, and then bookmyvaccine.com. I know the ministry has had 2 vaccination drives, particularly with the Pakistani community, one in Christchurch, one in Auckland as well. So if anyone needs any more information about the vaccination, its safety, its efficacy, please reach out and we'll be very happy to provide that. But do get vaccinated, because the more people who get vaccinated,
Yes,
the sooner we can get back to normalcy, and that people can travel as well, potentially.
I agree. That's the only way back.
Yeah. Yep. And we have seen that how we are getting all the letters in different languages for Book My Vaccine in different languages. So I guess that is a job done by the Ministry of Ethnic Communities, I guess. Yeah.
Yes,
So,
and the all of government
yeah.
team.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. So we have got another question, I guess, not related to your portfolio, but is there anything happening to control the housing crisis?
Yes, there is a lot of work underway, but you're absolutely right, and that does not sit within my portfolio.
Yeah.
What I will say, though, is if the person who's asked that question, if they'd like to send an email through, what I can do is to actually forward that request on to the Minister for Housing and get them a response to that as well. So I'm quite happy to do that, but I just don't think we have the time to get into that now, because I'm actually over time already.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And I've acknowledged your efforts, and the amount of work you're doing with the communities is wonderful. And you see how PANZ have grown in last 2 years. You must have seen that. And that is because of obviously, the support from the Office of Ethnic Communities, and now the Ministry of Ethnic Communities, Naveed Hamid, and the PANZ executive bodies working very closely with the Ministry of Ethnic Communities, and obviously your support is always there. Just the last question while we finish, what would you want to say to the communities in general while sitting in the lockdown?
Look, one is just stay safe. I know it's been tough for a number of different reasons. I mean, we're into what is it, our 5th week? I'm beginning to lose count, having sat in my bubble for this long as well. But a number of weeks of lockdown is difficult. The separation from close family members who are not in the country is also difficult. So firstly, I'm just going to say a huge thank you. Whether you're staying home and staying safe or you're at the front lines, as many of you will be, just a huge thank you from me. Keep reaching out. We're there to support one another. We're in this together. It's everything I feel is a collective effort. And get vaccinated. So on COVID, those are my main messages. Get vaccinated.
Yes, get
the
vaccinated.
other 2 things, if I could just quickly share with viewers as well, is today we opened applications to Youth Parliament. So for your younger members of the Pakistani Association or community more broadly as well, do reach out. Either check the New Zealand Parliament website if you're interested and you are aged between 16 and 18. You are eligible to apply to be a youth MP. So reach out to the New Zealand Parliament website or to your local MP and find out how you can be part of that. It's a great way to find out how Parliament works and how laws are created. And what happens in Parliament has such an impact on people's lives. So it's hugely important. So if you're interested, get in touch. So as Minister for Youth, I wanted to share that. I've just opened applications today. The final thing that I'll say is the other piece of work that I lead that I feel very strongly about is the Social Cohesion Work Programme. It also came out of the work that government's been doing after the March 15th attacks. And as I said previously, we are considered to have a high level of cohesion internationally, but we need to do more, and we need to do that collectively. So this piece of work will direct the work of government, the steps that we need to take to build or strengthen cohesion, and what communities need to do as well. Consultations are open. They've been extended because of the lockdown till the end of October. So it's on MSD's website, and I can share the links with you, both of you, to share with viewers as well further down the track.
Right.
But have your say. Have your say. Tell us what it means to you and what you think needs to happen for us to become a more cohesive society. So join the nominations database, get vaccinated, keep in touch with the ministry, have your say in social cohesion, and share information about Youth Parliament with your younger members. That's my messages to everyone.
Good to see a lot happening within the community and under your guidance as well. I'll ask Aisha.
Yeah, thank you very much, Priyanka, for your time, and we really appreciate all the efforts that you are putting in, and we can see all those changes. Like, trust me, I've seen how the things are changing in the education sector with bringing all the languages in and giving importance to all the different communities over there, and whatever is happening, it's really great. So thank you very much for that, and thank you for your precious time that you have spent with us. It was really very nice to see you here in our virtual studio.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you very much as well.
Yeah. Thanks for being approachable. Thanks for being approachable, and thanks for being thanks for doing what are you doing for us. Thank you very much. Have a very good evening.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Have a good night.
Bye.
See ya. Bye.
जबरदस्त, मजा आया आपको?
हाँ जी, मजा आया. Good.
बहुत अच्छा काम कर रही हैं, and I believe the support we are enjoying in terms of PANZ and Pakistan Association of New Zealand. She has highlighted so many initiatives. Youth Parliament है, funding available है, उसके बाद board के लिए nominations हैं, so many things. So I think if the community is watching us, and you must visit Ministry of Ethnic Communities website, see what are the initiatives they are rolling out, and you must apply for some of them, because the only way you want to be heard is that you need to go out. You need to come out of your houses. You need to come out of your self and apply for these opportunities. बहुत सारे लोग हैं जो काम कर रहे हैं अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह, उसमें जैसे अमार मनीर हैं, कैसर साहब हैं, बहुत सारे इनिशिएटिव्स के अंदर ये काम करें। नवीद हमीद की तो मैं कहता हूँ उनकी तो मिसाल ही नहीं मिलती है। इसके अलावा जो हमारी और बहुत सारी आप हैं माशाल्लाह, यू स्टार्टेड वॉलंटियरिंग, और आप देखेंगे विद इन फ्यू डेज वो बच्चे जिनको पेंसिल भी नहीं पकड़नी आती थी आज खत लिख रहे हैं अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह।
हाँ जी,
एंड दिस इज द पावर ऑफ वॉलंटियरिज्म विद इन दी सोसाइटी।
हाँ जी। हाँ जी, नहीं बोर्ड वो जो कह रही थी नॉमिनेशंस, वो तो आई वाज इंटरेस्टेड और मैं देख रही थी, लेकिन मुझे लगता है कि मेरा एक्सपीरियंस थोड़ा सा कम है उसके लिए। लेकिन मुझे ऐसे लगता है कि हमारी कम्युनिटी में बहुत सारे ऐसे लोग हैं जो बहुत कुछ कर चुके हैं और अब उनको स्टेप फॉरवर्ड करना चाहिए और इसको टेक ओवर करना चाहिए, क्योंकि जितनी हमारी रिप्रेजेंटेशन होगी उतनी ही हमारे लिए जो स्ट्रक्चर है मिनिस्ट्री का, या जो भी एक्ट्स वगैरह जो पास होते हैं वो हमारे फेवर में ही होंगे, या हमें जो सूट करते हैं वही होंगे
देखिए,
इंशाल्लाह।
पॉलिसी पे जब भी इन्फ्लुएंस होना है तो यू हैव टू हैव योर वॉइस हर्ड इन टर्म्स ऑफ योर लॉबिंग एंड एडवोकेसी, एंड दैट कैन ओनली बी डन व्हेन यू आर इनसाइड द सिस्टम, पार्ट ऑफ द सिस्टम। और उसके लिए आपको ऑब्वियसली व्हेन यू वांट टू बी अ पार्ट ऑफ द सिस्टम यू हैव टू वॉलंटियर। न्यूजीलैंड की सोसाइटी जो इतनी खूबसूरत है, वेयर दे हैव रीच, इज ऑल बिकॉज ऑफ द वॉलंटियरिज्म। देयर इज अ स्ट्रॉन्ग वॉलंटियरिज्म विद इन द सोसाइटी एंड विद इन द इंस्टीट्यूशंस एज वेल। और ये नहीं है कि बस वॉलंटियर कर दिया तो आपको कोई पूछने वाला नहीं, आप अपनी मर्जी से काम
हाँ
करें। दे गाइड यू, दे ब्रिंग बेस्ट आउट ऑफ यू। तो मेरा ख्याल ये है कि जो लोग हमें सुन रहे हैं, 20-25 लोग हैं, इसके अलावा भी जो बाद में प्रोग्राम को देखेंगे, तो वो पांच के साथ भी रब्ता करें, अपनी सर्विसेज को एक्सटेंड करें, वॉलंटियर करें। अगर 1 घंटा भी है वो भी अगर आप देंगे तो वो किसी ना किसी के काम आ जाएगा, कोई ना कोई आपके एक्सपीरियंस से सीख जाएगा। बहुत सारी
हाँ
ऐसी चीजें हैं जो विच यू हैव अर्नड ओवर द इयर्स। जैसे हमारे अब जो यंग बच्चे हैं जो यहाँ पे बढ़ रहे हैं, 12, 14, 15, 18 साल के बच्चे हैं, तो दे डू नॉट नो कि कैसे उनको ये आगे जाना है, कैसे कौन कौन सी अपॉर्चुनिटीज उनके लिए हैं, कैसे अपने आप को डिफरेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस के अंदर बिठाना है, पेनिट्रेट करना है। तो ये जो हमारे बहुत सारे लोग जो आगे बैठे हुए थे, अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह अगर वो कोशिश करेंगे तो जरूर होगा। और थैंक यू वेरी मच। आप भी बहुत, मैंने आगे पहले भी आपकी तारीफ की, और अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह आप, सानिया, अशरफ और हमारी जो और वुमेन विंग के लोग हैं, ईमान हमीद हैं, उसके अलावा मिसेस बिशारत हैं, फिर निदा फुरकान हैं, माशाल्लाह बहुत एक आप लोगों की स्ट्रॉन्ग टीम बनती जा रही है। तो क्या आगे चल के देख रही हैं आप?
बहुत कुछ देख रही हूँ, बहुत कुछ। अभी
अच्छा,
हमने काफी कुछ अचीव करना है और अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह अगर आपकी गाइडेंस रहे, नवीद भाई की गाइडेंस रहे, तो इंशाल्लाह हम आगे काफी कुछ अचीव करेंगे। मैं ये देखना चाह रही हूँ कि वुमेन जो है वो शाना बशाना जो है वो काम करे आदमियों के, और अपनी कैपेसिटी में जितना भी हो सके वो करें। और डेफिनेटली बच्चों के लिए मैं ये देखना चाह रही हूँ कि हमारे बच्चे जो हैं, जो हमारी यूथ है, वो सामने आए, और जैसा कि हमें प्रियंका ने भी बताया, तो वो जितनी भी अपॉर्चुनिटीज हैं वो अवेल करें, अपना आप जो है वो रिप्रेजेंट करें और सीखें, और चेंजेस जो हैं वो लाएं हमारे लिए इंशाल्लाह।
बेशक, बेशक। और इसके साथ ही मेरा ख्याल है कि हम अपने देखने वालों से इजाज़त चाहते हैं। थैंक
हाँ
यू
जी,
वेरी मच फॉर बीइंग पार्ट ऑफ द शो। काफ़ी मेहनत लगती है किसी भी प्रोग्राम को आप तक लाने के लिए, बहुत ज़्यादा हमें एफर्ट करनी पड़ती है। वी गो आउट ऑफ अवर वे एज़ वेल। इसी तरह जो हमारे साथ हमारी टीम है जिसमें पाकिस्तान एसोसिएशन के प्रेज़िडेंट नवीद हमीद हैं, अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह अल्लाह ताला उनको सेहत दे। मेरा ख्याल है कि ऐसे लोग जो हैं वो दुनिया में कम आते हैं जो अपनी कम्युनिटी को, अपने आप को कम्युनिटी को बिलोस खिदमत के लिए जो है ना सर्व कर
हाँ
देते हैं। इवन इसके ऊपर के बहुत सारी क्रिटिसिज्म भी सुननी पड़ती है। ऐसे लोग भी होते हैं जो घर में कभी कोई काम नहीं करते, लेकिन उनको जैसे कीबोर्ड मिलता है तो वो कीबोर्ड वॉरियर बन जाते हैं। तो और उसके अलावा जो पाकिस्तान एसोसिएशन की टीम है जिसमें इनकी सारी एग्जीक्यूटिव कमेटी की टीम है, एडवाइजरी बॉडी की टीम है, विंग्स हैं, वुमेन विंग है, स्पोर्ट्स विंग है, ये सारे के सारे लोग अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह बहुत ही अच्छा काम कर रहे हैं। टीम ग्रो कर रही है, स्ट्रेंथ टू स्ट्रेंथ हो रही है। तो मेरा ख्याल है कि जो लोग हमें देख रहे हैं वो भी इसको ज्वाइन करिएगा। अपना बहुत ज्यादा ख्याल रखिएगा। सिस्टर, आप आ जाते जाते कोई आखिर में बात कहेंगी या मैं अल्लाह हाफिज कह दूं?
मैं नवीद हमीद के बारे में बात करना चाहूंगी। नवीद भाई जो है वो, उनकी एक बात जो है वो मुझे अच्छी लगी, और इसीलिए मैं अभी तक इधर हूँ आप लोगों के साथ। और वो ये है कि वो बहुत ही ज्यादा फ्लेक्सिबल है। और आप यकीन माने, अगर आप किसी भी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में काम कर रहे हो जहां आपको फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी मिलती है, प्रोडक्टिविटी और क्रिएटिविटी वही होती है।
बेशक
ठीक है, वो
मिलती है।
माइक्रो मैनेज नहीं करते, आपको गाइड जरूर करते हैं, लेकिन वो आपको फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी भी देते हैं कि अपनी क्रिएटिविटी जो है वो शो करे। तो जितने भी लोग हमारे पास है जो इंटरेस्टेड हैं पैंस को ज्वाइन करने के लिए या वॉलंटरी काम करने के लिए, प्लीज कम फॉरवर्ड और प्लीज आप कम्युनिटी को हेल्प करें इन एनी वे यू कैन।
बिल्कुल ठीक है।
And
मैं जाते
that's
जाते मजहर मलिक का आंसर, नीड टू रिकॉग्नाइज द उर्दू लैंग्वेज इन अ गवर्नमेंट प्लेटफॉर्म, दिस हैज ऑलरेडी बीन रिकॉग्नाइज। बहुत सारे उनकी जो कम्युनिकेशंस हैं, बहुत सारे जो खतो किताबत है, उसके अलावा जो
हाँ
कम्युनिटी के लिए जो पैगामात हैं वो अब उर्दू के अंदर आना शुरू हो गए हैं।
हम्म,
और गवर्नमेंट उसको बाकायदा अब उन्होंने अपने पास उर्दू के इंटरप्रेटर्स भी हैं जिसके
हाँ
बदौलत
जी,
वो इंग्लिश के हर मैसेज को उर्दू में इंटरप्रेट करती है।
हम्म,
और उर्दू इज कंसिडर वन ऑफ द लार्जेस्ट लैंग्वेजेस विद इन द एथनिक कम्युनिटीज इन न्यूजीलैंड। तो अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह ये पाकिस्तान एसोसिएशन की ही मरहून मिन्नत है कि अब ये
हाँ जी,
चीजें जो हैं वो हो रही हैं और आगे चलकर अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह इसमें और भी काम होगा। और जैसे अभी हमने स्कूल का काम किया, इसके अलावा और भी बहुत सारी चीजें होंगी। तो ये इटसेल्फ एन अचीवमेंट फॉर अस कि हमारी जो मेहनतें हैं पिछले 2-3 साल से हम जो काम कर रहे थे उसको गवर्नमेंट भी रिकॉग्नाइज किया। आपने सुना भी होगा प्रियंका राधाकृष्णन ने भी उसको रिकॉग्नाइज किया। और इसके अलावा गवर्नमेंट के जो जैसे प्राइम मिनिस्टर है वो भी जानती हैं कि पाकिस्तान एसोसिएशन ऑफ न्यूजीलैंड और पाकिस्तानी कम्युनिटी कितना यूजफुल काम कर रही है कम्युनिटी के पोटेंशियल को हाईलाइट करने में। खैर बातें चलती रहेंगी और इसके साथ मेरा ख्याल है कि हम प्रोग्राम का इख्तिताम करें।
हाँ जी।
बातें तो मैं मुझसे जितनी मर्जी करा ले मैं करता ही रहूंगा, मुझे अगर 1 घंटा और भी दे दिया जाए तो मेरे लिए टाइम कम होगा। तो इसके साथ ही मैं आखिरी जो है, पाकिस्तान जिंदाबाद, अपना बहुत ख्याल रखिएगा।
अल्लाह हाफिज।
अल्लाह हाफिज। पाकिस्तान जिंदाबाद जी।